When you want to sound more articulate, you're essentially focusing on the clarity of your speech. You want to ensure that the words you use to convey your message are pronounced clearly and distinctly, so the other person can understand what you're saying. But unfortunately, some people make mistakes in their speech that lead them to not sound articulate at all. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you some of the more common mistakes that you want to avoid if you want to sound articulate when you speak. Starting with mistake number 1, you are monotone. So instead of sounding lively when you speak, you sound dull and boring because everything is said at the same pitch and vocal range. This is what I mean by being monotone. It's when your voice is at the same pitch without intonation and without expressiveness. A monotone voice can be very effective in comedies. Think of the film American Pie. The father in that film, he uses a very monotone voice when he speaks to everyone. But if you want to get your point across, if you want to make an impact when you speak, a monotone voice isn't going to help you. So to avoid a monotone voice, try to vary your pitch when you speak. The way I've learned how to do this is by listening to podcasts of people who speak in a way that I admire. Usually the reason I admire the way they speak is because they use enough variety in their voice to hold my interest and my attention. I try to replicate the way they say sentences, and over time, their communication style becomes ingrained in my mind, and without me knowing it, I can easily replicate their communication style and sound more articulate when I speak. By the way, varying your pitch will help you to be heard and understood better in crowded environments, for example, networking events, business meetings, or social gatherings. Men's voices in particular tend to blend in with that type of environmental or room noise because your voice is at the same pitch as that room noise. So if you have ever found it hard to be heard and to be understood in crowded environments like social gatherings, then that is the reason why. Simply varying your pitch will help you to overcome that. Mistake number 2, you omit or distort important speech sounds. Speech sounds are incredibly important when you want to sound more articulate. This means that every sound in the words that you use must be articulated clearly in order for your speech to be heard and understood. An example of distorting or omitting important speech sounds would be the L in words such as already, all right, always. Instead of saying already, when you omit or distort the speech sound, it would sound like already. Instead of saying all right, it would sound like all right, all right. Instead of saying always, it would sound like always, always. So instead of having the AL sound like all, where you clearly hear the L sound when that person speaks, it really sounds like an OR, or, all right, already. Another example is the T sound that you would find in words or phrases such as it was, meeting, can't, a little bit. And when you omit or distort these sounds, it would sound like it was, meeting, can't, a little bit. So instead of clearly pronouncing the T so those words or phrases can be clearly and easily understood by the other person, you omit or distort the T sound. You merge the words together, kind of mesh the sounds together, so you can't even really hear the T being pronounced at all. Another example is the G sound that you would find in words such as going, singing, talking. So the final G sound in those words. And when you omit or distort the final G sound, it would sound like going, singing, talking. In these examples I just shared with you, when you hear words pronounced in an inarticulate way, you probably understand what that other person is saying. You probably understand what they're trying to get across. But does it make them sound articulate? So how do you know if you omit or distort important speech sounds? Well, if you have people who often ask you to repeat what you have just said, that is a sign that you might be omitting or distorting speech sounds. Of course, you don't want to overpronounce sounds, but by putting in a little bit of effort to make those important sounds more distinct, it will help you to sound more articulate. Mistake number 3, you speak too fast. One of the causes of meshing your words and syllables together is that you speak too fast. When you speak too fast, you don't give yourself enough time to pronounce the words and syllables properly. This results in everything being meshed together and not being clear or distinct, which, if you remember from the beginning of this video, is what you need in order to sound more articulate. How do you know if you speak too fast? Well, the speed at which you should speak, it does depend on the purpose of your communication. If you're trying to motivate or energize people, you might speak faster. If you're trying to explain a complicated topic, it's in your best interest to speak a little slower. If you're speaking to a large crowd or in a crowded environment, I recommend that you speak a little slower or use a microphone if you can. To give you a guideline, the average speaking rate for English speakers in the US is between 150 words per minute to 160 words per minute. I think a good range for you to aim for is between 140 words per minute to 170 words per minute. I tested my speaking rate using this activity I'm going to share with you right now. I read a passage which you are seeing on the screen right now. This passage consists of 160 words exactly. If I were to speak at a rate of 150 to 160 words per minute, then it should take me roughly a minute to complete this passage, since it contains 160 words. So I read this passage 3 times, trying to use my normal speaking voice that I would if I was in a conversation with someone. The first time I read this passage, it took me 55 seconds to read. The second time, it took me 64 seconds to read this passage. The third time I read it, it took me 63 seconds to complete this passage. So I averaged the 3 sessions, reading sessions that I did, and I came to a total of 60.6 seconds, which means it took me about 60 seconds or 1 minute to read this 160 word passage, which puts me in the average category for the speed at which I speak. If you want to do this test yourself using the exact same passage I just showed you on the screen a moment ago, then look in the description below. You will find a link to my website, to a blog post where I have written this exact passage that I used. You can copy and paste it into a text document and you can practice using it. I recommend that you read it in a natural speaking voice 3 times. Time yourself as you do it and then get an average of the 3 reading sessions to see if you fall within the average speaking rate of between 140 to 170 words per minute. Mistake number 4 is that you speak too quiet. When you don't have enough overall volume, your listener will only be able to hear parts of what you say, or maybe none of what you say. They'll miss out on hearing important sounds in your words. They'll miss out on hearing emphasis in your speech. These are things that we rely on to decipher, hear, and understand what somebody is saying. If you can't be heard, you won't be understood. If you can't be understood, you won't be articulate. In a small room or in a one-on-one conversation, being heard generally isn't a problem. But as the room size increases, as the number of people in the room also increase, being heard can be more challenging. And you might need to adapt your voice in order to be heard and sound articulate. So what we're really talking about here is projecting your voice. Projecting your voice so no matter what room size you are in, no matter how many people are in the room, you can be heard. So there are a number of things that you can do to project your voice. I'm going to share some of those things with you right now. The first thing is to relax your throat, your neck, and your shoulders. These are the areas that you use when you speak. The muscles that you use when you speak are all within this area. So this area needs to be relaxed. You don't want it tense. It needs to be relaxed in order for you to produce sounds that are clear, distinct, and articulate. So using good posture, making sure your shoulders are sitting comfortably back and down, this will help you to relax this entire area and to open it up so you can produce the sounds that you need. The second thing you can do is to take deeper breaths. You need to make a conscious effort to change your breathing, move it from this upper area here in your chest down further into your diaphragm. And when you get practice doing this, when you are used to doing this, it will help you to draw in more air so you can produce the sounds that you need. And so you can speak the length that you need to speak rather than cutting off halfway in a sentence because you've run out of breath. The third thing you can do is to speak to the back of the room. So a lot of the time, especially in public presentations, people speak to the first row of people in the audience. Now, those people are probably going to hear you fine, no matter the room size, because of the proximity they have to you. But if you want the people at the back of the room to hear you, you need to make your voice travel to the back of the room. And you do this by projecting your voice to the very back of the room, to the last person in the audience. So imagine that you are speaking to the last person in the audience. You can even look them in the eye if that will help you, to use a voice that is loud enough so those people at the back are going to hear you. The fourth thing you can do is to know your content. So sometimes what causes us to use a quiet voice is that we're unsure of our content. We don't have the confidence in our content or confidence in our competence. And this can cause us to want to be shy. It can cause us to not want to really be heard just in case we say the wrong thing or in case somebody asks questions. I recommend that you get to know your content really, really well. Become confident in your content so that you can confidently talk about it in a voice that is loud enough for other people to hear you and understand what you're saying. The fifth tip I can share with you to speak in a louder voice is to start your sentences off louder. So sometimes people start their sentences off in a really quiet way and then they might ramp up what they have to say. But if people miss the first part of your sentence, if they even miss the first sound in a word, it's very possible that they won't understand what you've said. So what I recommend you do is to start your sentences off strong by using a loud voice at the very beginning, the very first sound in that sentence. Mistake number 5 is you talk to your chin. This means that you mumble and you have a combination of not enough volume and bad enunciation. Basically, you're not speaking clearly, which, as you know, leads to inarticulate speech. Mumbling is common when you are speaking to people whom you see all of the time. For example, your spouse or your really good friends. You start to put in less and less effort when you are speaking to those people, and this can lead you to mumble and sound inarticulate. Mumbling is also common when you are tired because you don't have enough energy to draw in the oxygen that you need to produce the sounds that you need to produce. It's also common when you are nervous because you don't want to use a loud voice because perhaps you don't want other people to hear you. It's also very common when you are speaking too fast because, like I've mentioned earlier in the video, you don't give yourself enough time to produce the sounds that you need. But mumbling certainly does not help you to sound more articulate, which at the end of the day is what you want to achieve. So try to put in a little more effort into your speech. Try to produce the sounds that you need. Take in more oxygen, breathe deeper. Take more time to produce the sounds that you need to produce and get confident in the content that you are talking about. A little bit of effort goes a really long way when it comes to speaking and sounding more articulate. Mistake number 6, you use the same vocabulary or you use a low level of vocabulary. In either case, both of these mistakes will make you sound inarticulate when you speak. You see, when we think of people who are articulate, we imagine them to be educated and cultured. And as such, we expect them to have a developed level of vocabulary so they can express themselves in an eloquent and meaningful way. People who use the same vocabulary and keep repeating the same words all the time, or who use a low level of vocabulary to express themselves, don't match the image that we have of somebody who is articulate. I recommend that you start to expand your vocabulary, start to learn new words to include in your speech, start to learn new phrases that you can use in your sentences, start to incorporate both these new words and these new phrases when you speak. These things will help you sound more articulate. And definitely check out this video on the screen above that will help you to expand your vocabulary so you can sound more articulate. Mistake number 7, you don't finish your sentences. You might lack confidence in what you're saying. You might just be a lazy speaker. Either way, not finishing your sentences leaves the listener with an incomplete thought, and it robs you of the opportunity to sound articulate in that moment. Even if as you are speaking, the other person is nodding their head and indicating that they know exactly what you're saying and what you're going to say, embrace this speaking opportunity and finish your sentences off strong. Don't trail off at the end of your sentences. Don't reduce the volume at the end of your sentences. And don't expect the other person to finish your sentences for you. I know in social conversations, when you have a good connection with someone, these things can happen, but in important business conversations, you're only doing yourself a disservice and you're opening up the opportunity for somebody else to steal your thought. So put in the extra effort and finish your sentences properly. I have an entire playlist on how to be more articulate and well-spoken. As you probably guessed, it's a topic I'm very passionate about. So head over to this playlist up here, take a look at the videos, pick out 2 or 3 of videos that you are really interested in watching, save them to your watch later list on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button below. Subscribe to my channel for more content like this in the future, and I will see you in the next video.